Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard. I went from being a lawyer and partner at one of the largest firms in America to becoming an online personality and successful entrepreneur. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your health and personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you chase joy while achieving success? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back to Hustle and Flow. I am your host, Heather Hubbard, and today we have a special guest. We have Kelly Ruta. She was a clinical psychotherapist for over 20 years, and then she moved into the world of coaching to help entrepreneurs create an inner operating system for rapid scaling without rapid breakdown. And she helps you, if you are the leader, if you are the business owner, to not be the bottleneck of your company, which I have been, you may have been as well. She believes that entrepreneurs are perfectly positioned to create a massive positive impact on the planet, but there is no strategy, plan, or tactic that's going to ever outperform your mindset, limiting beliefs, conditioned programs, or habits. Amen. I agree with that. And Kelly is obsessed with helping entrepreneurs and their teams do deep inner work, including building emotional agility as a power skill while they scale and grow. Kelly, welcome to Hustle and Flow.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Can't wait to dive into the conversation. I feel like it's going to be a juicy one.
Yes. Okay. So I feel like we are very similar in so many ways, as are our listeners. So you practiced in a clinical profession for 20 years.
I did.
And I know a little bit about your story, but you started feeling burnout, you started feeling resentment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious what just a little bit about your story and what is it about these like patriarchal professions that were built by white men without any responsibilities for white men without any responsibilities other than their careers that sets us women up for such burnout and fatigue and resentment.
Mm-hmm. That's such a powerful question. And I feel like there are so many layers to that question that we could do a 20-part podcast series on just on that question alone. But, so many of the helping quote unquote professions attract women, but they're taught by and have systems that are built by men. And so from a young age, about 16, knew that I wanted to be a counselor, therapist, or a psychiatrist, one of those in that field. I knew I was naturally good at helping people and wanted to make a profession out of it. So I got some sage advice from counselors, friends, adults, whatever, went to undergrad for psychology, got some really fantastic advice from a female professor who actually graduated in the first class of women out of Princeton. So I still keep in touch with her today. She's amazing. And she said to me, don't go where they're telling you to go. Do not go get a PhD. She said, unless you want to do research or become a professor, don't bother. She said, do not go get a master's degree in psychology because you won't be able to do anything with it. She said, go get a degree in clinical social work. And I was really sort of blown back because I had studied psychology and didn't realize how much overlap there was, and also didn't realize that it was the most versatile degree. So once I had my license and then did 8 billion hours of supervision, I was able to go into private practice, a school, a hospital, a business, really any place I wanted to go. So I ended up working in a high school doing mental health and substance abuse intervention with adolescents, which I loved. The more difficult they were, the more I loved them. And then I started a private practice in the evenings and started keynote speaking at 22 years old. That was the plan, Heather. And we all know about plans. My plan was to just do that forever. And then I don't know what my idea about retiring was, but just, work till retirement age. Well, I got to be about 40, 42, 43-ish. And I knew I did powerful, meaningful, life altering, and sometimes life saving work. And I was tired of accepting $62 from whatever insurance company for that work. Just tired of it. So the burnout didn't actually come from the work. I loved the work. That intersection of the brain, the psyche, and behavior is just a sweet spot for me. But I got burned out from the amount of energy, and I always keep a level of excellence and just caring so much and not having an equitable value exchange in place. And I just decided that was no longer acceptable for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. We could also do an entire episode on insurance and just the
Mm,
state of
mm.
healthcare in the United States. But we're not going to do that because we've got so much other stuff that I know we want to get into. So you then start your own business,
Mhm,
similar path, right? So you
mhm,
become an entrepreneur, you start helping people, you build a multi six-figure business,
mhm,
and then COVID hits.
mhm.
Tell us about it.
So, my business was doing really, really well. I was fortunate. I was able to make six figures right out of the gate, and then spent a handful of years just building that up through different marketing strategies and offers, things like that. Really just testing the
Yeah.
waters to see what would be the best for people. Had that dialed in, and then COVID hit. Because I have been a lifelong asthmatic, my doctor said, he called me and said, listen, you're grounded. This is March. Everything closed in March in the United States. He said, you're grounded. You're not going anywhere. You're not doing anything, because if this hits you, you're going to be done for, thinking that it would be a respiratory problem. So I started quarantining, really, it'll be 4 years ago this coming Sunday, actually, the day after my
Yeah.
son's birthday. That's how I remember. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't do any of the grocery shop. I did nothing. And I got diagnosed with COVID July 10th. And we still don't know how I got it. Nobody around me was sick or symptomatic. Um, and I just never got better. I never got better. So I was in bed for 6 weeks, could not sit up, needed assistance just to get to the bathroom. I was sick for about 10 months after that, actively sick in such a way that I dropped everything in my business except my one-on-one, because I can only be out of bed about 2 hours a day. And those were the 2 hours I spent working, and really just lived in bed for the better part of about 2.5, 3 years with no help in sight whatsoever. And just consistently being told, be grateful that you didn't die. So, long story short, I ended up getting COVID again in 2022, July again of 2022, which made all of my original symptoms 10x. I had made some improvement, but the virus really went to my brain and my nervous system. So, for someone like me who's been keynote speaking, training, workshopping, facilitating for over 30 years, I couldn't come up with basic everyday language. I lost memory, I lost vocabulary, couldn't focus, couldn't complete tasks, widespread pain all over my body. Could not, I still have POTS, which is a side effect of lots of illnesses, but I can't maintain my blood pressure um, and my heart rate at healthy levels. It just made it impossible to work. I was very fortunate that I know how to read a clinical study. And so one of the things I did when I was able to read again, because that's one of the things I lost, was my eyes could not track words for a very long time. When that came back, I just started reading clinical study after clinical study and found that there was a cocktail of antihistamine medications that were working for a lot of people. I tried it. And within 5 days, I was out of bed. And that was incredible. And I just started building after that. This was just last May. So not even a year am I back to things. And by back to things, I mean, I'm mostly out of bed every day. So that brings us to today. So I took a scaled business and in 6 weeks broke the whole thing down, let the entire team go, with the exception of a little admin help for scheduling and billing, and just went right back to one-on-one work.
It's kind of wild how similar our stories are. Um, where, yeah, same thing, had this thriving business, then ended up with an adrenal tumor
Mm,
where I lost, but like I was struggling with vocabulary, struggling with emotions. It totally impacted my nervous system. And it really, we think it will never happen to us. And yet, the more people I talk to, the more stories I hear.
mhm,
And I feel like once you hit your 40s, and obviously, COVID has kind of changed so many different things.
mm,
I just think that there are so many women who either are dealing with health issues themselves, they have a child dealing
mhm,
with health issues, or they have a parent dealing with health issues. And we
mhm.
just don't really talk about it that much
Yes.
or how much of an impact it has on our business. And I think it's so important we have these conversations so that people know, one, they are not alone. Two, it is okay to step back
Mhm,
and let people go and slow down your business, even if that is the scariest thing in the world. And it's okay to come back
mhm,
and to let that look a little bit different. I'm assuming, I'm not sure. I have so much more clarity now that when I had to step back, that I am so super clear on who I want to work with and why. And I'm not willing to negotiate that. Whereas previously, before all this happened, I still was in a much better place
mhm.
than when I was as a practicing professional. But I was still probably doing way more than I should have just because I was scaling, I was doing the things and not really stopping to say, is this what brings me the most joy?
Yes. I love everything you just said with the exception of the awful part of your journey, which I just have so much compassion for people going through things that are not really just in the common vernacular. So I'm often the first person somebody meets who's been diagnosed with long COVID. People will tell me that all the time. I don't know anybody with that diagnosis.
Yeah.
So the thing that really became very crystal clear for me was I'm a very ambitious, very driven human being. That was part of a central part of my identity. And it was causing me the biggest amount of trouble because I needed to separate myself from that part of my identity to be able to rest on every level, mentally, emotionally, physically, energetically, rest across the board. And I 1000% was doing too much prior to getting sick and had goals in mind, which is why I was working so hard. And I had to let all of it go without losing my sense of self, my self esteem, my confidence, my belief in myself, all of those things. And without letting dreams go all the way, meaning I've had to tweak what success looks like, feels like, sounds like to me, but I still get to pursue it. Now the question is how? What's in my best interest? Because what's in other people's best interest has never been anything I've not thought about ever.
Right.
I come from a service-based background. I'm just trained to constantly be focused on the outcomes another person gets. But it's very easy to forget about yourself in the mix. And now my body, as a result of the damage the virus did, my body will not allow me to forget at all. So really every day is different, and pacing myself for success is an integral part that is not negotiable. My boundaries have always been very strong. I have a lot of people who refer to me as the boundary queen, but what I will tell you is there is a new level of clarity around where my energy goes that I did
Yeah.
not have before. And that
Right.
is not negotiable, not negotiable. Even, and oftentimes people don't understand, because one of the first things I hear is, you don't look sick. I don't look sick. A lot of people with these quote unquote invisible illnesses don't look sick. And yet we are profoundly unwell on a lot of levels.
I had so many people after the fact say, I had no idea you were that sick. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, I think, especially as women, right? High achievers,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one, like we don't necessarily physically look sick, but two, like we know how to show up, right? Like
Oh,
we know how to present.
yes.
But it doesn't mean that we're not well. And it's interesting, we were both talking about we were doing our own research, we were doing our own advocacy. We were not correctly diagnosed. We were not given solutions on how to start feeling better. We had to figure that out ourselves. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's just so important for people to hear that if they are also struggling and you don't quite answer, keep going, keep
Mm-hmm.
pushing. You're probably going to be the answer on this. Um, but yes, it's interesting. I ended up doing a talk when I was sick about your own, like your business is only as healthy as you are.
Mm-hmm.
And, sometimes we have to have these issues come up for us to really get it. But the more I feel like people can hear and fully embrace that, because right, we say like, oh, I have to put the business first, or oh, I have to put the kids first, or oh, like I have to do all these things first. And it's like, if you're not healthy, if you're not taking care of yourself as much as you can, you really can't serve. And I think you and I know that to another level, because like truly you're out. Like you're
Agreed.
out.
Agreed. And that can, just for your listeners to give some context, because there might be someone listening who has gone through cancer or, some other really major diagnosis or a life-altering injury, right? And they're saying, oh, I can relate. I didn't have the same illness, but the same degree. I want everybody else who's saying, that's not me, I've not gone through that, to also understand that this is for you. This message is for you as well. Number one, not to be morbid or to try to be a fear monger, but you never know what's around the corner. That's number one. And number two, if you are fortunate enough for a physical ailment to pass you by and you don't ever have to deal with something like that, the statement you made is still true. Because if you're not taking care of your body, your mental health, all the forms of well-being, well, your business is basically an extension of you in a lot of ways. And depending where you are in your business journey, you maybe are a little more involved with the everyday or a little more removed, but it's still your business and you're still making 18,000 decisions every single day. And it is very energy demanding to be a business owner or entrepreneur. Like, this is not for the faint of heart, right? So please don't dismiss what we're saying because you can't relate because you haven't had a horrible illness. And I hope it stays that way. But if you are not bringing the best version of you, A, you can't give your best, but B, you can't receive either. And that is what is harder, generally speaking, for women. We are conditioned to nurture and give. And we have been taught not to receive in alignment with what we give, to just take what's offered to us, to just say, oh, well, I'll be fine. It's, living on ramen noodles it's fine as long as I'm out saving the world, right? And this is nonsense. So we have to become as talented of a receiver as we are a giver. And that requires us to bring our full selves forward, because you're going to have to do some inner work to become that person. That takes energy. It takes bravery. It takes persistence. It takes just grit. It takes a lot of things. So please find yourself in this conversation, because this is for you too.
Well, and I'm curious, and maybe this is not the case, but with the work that you do related to scaling without breaking down and related to not being the bottleneck of your company, I'm guessing that those are actually related to exactly what you're talking about right now.
100%. So the work that I do is all of the inner development work that drives the measurable outcomes in business. So drives money, hiring, turnover in terms of team, productivity, all the other scaling activities, sales, marketing, being able to pitch yourself, to negotiate, all of those things require you to become evolved and that next version of yourself all the time. And then that drives the next version of the business. So 100% yes to what you're saying, because all of those things depend on how we see ourselves, what our habits are, what our conditioning is, our upper limits. We've got to work through all of those things. You can't just apply strategies, tactics, frameworks, things like that and think, oh, that's all we need to do to make a 6 or 7 figure business. It's not. You become the bottleneck at some point. And so the way you start to change that is, yes, with systems and operations and great hires, but that also comes from decisions you make or avoid making.
Oh my goodness. This is such a good topic because I love strategy. And I often say, I have given so many people so many amazing strategies that they never executed because of the underlying mindset issues.
Bingo. That's why I have a business. That is the entire background of my business, because when I was researching how I could bring my skill set to the market in a way that is different than like a life coach or somebody that went through just, a coaching certification, this is what I was seeing. Business owners were saying to me, strategists and consultants and coaches and teachers were saying to me, listen, I've given them the information. I've taught it and presented it and packaged it 27 different ways for every kind of learning style, right? So I'm giving them the best knowledge there is, and they're not implementing it. And even worse, sometimes they're pushing back at me about it, even though it's say a proven best practice in marketing or something else. And that's how I started getting a lot of business, because of frustrated business coaches, strategists, consultants were saying, can you please work with this person so that she gets the ROI on my program? Right. And she also in the process comes into herself. So we want the hard numbers as outcomes, but we also want our clients going, I've never been so confident in my life. I've never been so sure of myself, so convicted to my values, my ethics, my dreams, my desires. We want all of that for them too. We don't want either or. We want them to have both. And so it's the combination of that inner work and the outer strategic work. That combo is what makes things really rock and roll.
Yeah. And I think we can, because we all have, right? Like we all have these issues, like, but it's your commitment to working through them. And as
Yes.
you grow, new things just show up. So it may start as, I don't have the courage to implement boundaries,
Right.
or I don't have the confidence to put myself out there and be visible, or it has something to do with marketing and sales. But once you get established, it then becomes mindset issues around continued growth,
Mhm.
growing that team. What are some of the biggest, mindset habit issues that you see showing up
Mhm.
um, for leaders who are growing their business and start to really become the bottleneck?
Mhm. So unless you have come from a family of really successful entrepreneurs, or even sometimes a really significant amount of wealth, which is most people have not come from those backgrounds, the issue becomes out earning your family. So making more money than your parents, your grandparents, your great grandparents, your siblings, most of your friends, possibly your spouse. This is a big trigger when we grow past probably $300,000. And it is very confusing for people because they're so clear that they want it. They're so clear about the path. They're so clear about the experience they want that when they start bumping up against old beliefs and old mindsets and old, yeah, but, and what if, and who the heck do you think you are? And all that stuff that they thought they already worked out comes flooding back. It can really be destabilizing to your sense of self and to your just confidence and conviction to your dreams. It's the place where cracks happen and self-doubt starts to sneak in. So the way I tend to work with it is in layers. The easiest layer to access is your money beliefs. And I'm not talking about your conscious money beliefs. Your subconscious money beliefs are what drive everything. Everything. You cannot outgrow your subconscious mind. It will not, we're not built that way as humans. I laugh all the time and I say, you chose to become an entrepreneur, which is super cool, but you don't get to opt out of being a human being first. We all have this stuff going on. We all have a psyche and a brain that are generally similar in design. You have to learn how to work with it. And once I can get into the money work with people, two other root problems come to the surface. And that's your belief around your adequacy and your belief around safety. Is it safe for me to be seen? Is it safe for me to be successful? Is it safe for me to be wealthy? Is it safe for me to show up, say, on social media and claim that I'm an expert in something? So those are the things that then bubble up after we work through the money, because unless you feel safe to grow, you will not. Safety is hardwired into our psyches for survival. So any beliefs that you have, whether you intellectually agree with them or not, is irrelevant, really irrelevant, which is why women say to me, I know better than this. Why do I keep sabotaging myself, my team, my business plan, what my accountant tells me to do, what my coach tells me to do? This is why. Because you likely have a subconscious belief that is not on the same page as what you intellectually believe. And that's where the real change starts to happen.
I mean, I think everyone listening, this is a very smart group. They intellectually can grasp most anything,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not the same as being able to change it. It's not the
Right.
same as like being on a cellular level,
Correct. And
deep inside your phones.
that's why this work is frustrating and so many entrepreneurs avoid it, because we're all pretty smart. I mean, I don't attract non-intellectual people. They don't like me. So I don't end up with groups of people who don't understand a formula, a framework, a blueprint, even a complex, multifaceted strategy for business growth. Everybody can wrap their brains around this. Funnels and all those things. Everybody gets it. Everybody gets it. And if that's all it took, we'd all be billionaires, right? What it takes is a conviction to your dreams and goals that is so big that you are willing to do deeply uncomfortable work that results in you moving the real obstacles out of the way. We like to think the real obstacle is, building a business is hard. Finding good hires is hard. Retaining good employees is hard. Managing my finances is hard. We like to think of it just on a logical, rational level because it's easier to wrap your brain around. It makes perfect sense. And human beings don't like to be uncomfortable. We like to be cozy with things. Well, intellectualization is a defense mechanism. It's a psychological defense mechanism. So people who are very smart love to hang out in their smarts, but it doesn't solve everything. And then it becomes very frustrating. And the problem, Heather, is that very smart women, especially, will go at it and go at it and go at it and pivot and try again and eventually go, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me that I can't do this, but he can, but she can? What am I missing? What's broken about me that she can do it, but I can't seem to figure it out? And that's where we get in big trouble. There's nothing broken or wrong. The issue is your beliefs don't match up with where you need and want to go. So either you feel unsafe doing it, unworthy of receiving it, or you really have money blocks that just need to be shifted. And they're not conscious intellectual blocks. You don't need to go read a book about money management. You can, I'm not saying it won't be helpful, but it's not going to bust through the deeper things that are the true obstacles. And that's uncomfortable and a little bit messy.
Yeah. Well, and as you're talking about the safety, trust is a big thing for me.
Mhm.
And I remember kind of before everything shut down, the everything was growing so fast and more team members, right? More like just more. And I totally, which of course at the time I didn't see it, I didn't realize it. I was so worried that like we weren't going to have the systems in place. I was
Mm.
so worried. It was like, well, we've got to do this right and we've got to do that right. And I was wanting people to basically be able to just think like me.
Mhm.
Right. So it's like, well, I used to do all these things. So basically, I just need someone to, I hire someone to basically step in and do it exactly the way I would do it and get the exact same result. And if
Mhm.
that's not happening, then either they're not a good fit or I'm not doing a good job giving them instructions. And
Mhm.
so, I mean, I had different operations people in, worked with multiple different business coaches on systems and operations and teams, and nothing really was moving the needle. We were doing a ton of busy work, a ton of actually trying to, everyone on the team, right? Trying to get us all aligned and make sure that we're doing the work. Because it's easy for me to check those boxes and do the work. And what's the system and what's the formula?
Sure.
And the truth was, the biggest thing getting in the way was my perfectionism and my ability to trust other people not only to do the work but to do it in their own way and it not have to be and look, exactly the way I would do it. And
Yes.
that truly was the biggest issue.
Yes. This is a very common story with women I work with who are in that phase of their business journey. You're realizing you have to step out a little bit more so that you can work on the business versus in the business, but you need somebody to come in and be implementing all these things in the business and keep things moving, right? And this is what comes up: perfectionism, micromanaging, not trusting, not delegating, making assumptions that, the opposite end of micromanaging, which is, I'm just figure it out. I don't have time for this. All of these things stem from not feeling safe. Not feeling safe extends out to trust. It extends out to things like delegating, micromanaging, even how you set up your vetting system for hiring will be tweaked by how much you're willing to trust people and how much you're willing to hand over. And so it's really common for me to hear that, oh, I went and I hired somebody to really like laser in on our systems and make them a lot more efficient and effective and all those things. Or I hired somebody to come in and make my team more proficient so they could be, more productive. And it still didn't change. Yeah, because we became the bottleneck. And it is almost always about inadequacy or safety or both. They often go hand in hand, and talk about like a 1-2 punch that causes people not to do anything and get stuck. It's I feel like I'm not enough and I feel unsafe. That is a recipe for emotional cement, truly.
That's where I was
Mhm.
100%. And it did feel like emotional cement because I didn't recognize the inadequacy part. But now that you're mentioning it, the perfectionism, that was the inadequacy because I
Sure.
needed things to be perfect because I have a very critical, the story I tell myself is I have a very critical, judgmental audience, but just based on their own upbringing and their own professions. And if things aren't perfect, if they don't appear perfect, then they won't be happy with me. Then they're going to judge me. And thank goodness I think, mostly let that go. I was so proud of myself. I noticed in a workbook I had misspelled something, and I was like, way to go, Heather.
Yeah.
Because like it doesn't matter. Like it genuinely doesn't matter. But we
No.
tell ourselves that it is like the end of the world.
Mhm.
And that is totally just an inadequacy issue.
Mhm. It is. And you can see that also the other branch of having to be perfect is about safety, in that you did not feel safe enough at whatever time to put yourself out there as the imperfect but wonderful person that you are. So it's that double whammy that really gets people stuck. And it's not just stuck in your feels, right? Like we can get stuck in our feels about it. We have shame come up, we have guilt, anger, frustration, a lot of things, but it's so much more than that. It's about what it impacts, the impact it has on our decisions and our behavior. So does that kick you into hustle and grind mode where you are overperforming to overcompensate? Do you get overwhelmed and shut down and do nothing at all? Or do you also get into a place where you just spin because you're just overanalyzing and trying to find the answer and trying to find the perfect way and trying, so that either you're getting busy work done that doesn't move the needle, but looks like you're getting work done, right? Or you just get stuck not making a decision and things come to a standstill or start to backslide.
Right.
And that's why I'm so passionate about
sight of the big picture. You lose sight of the strategy, because you're trying to get each little thing perfect. And it's like, that's not what's going to move the needle forward.
Right.
We could go on and on and on. I know we are at time. So I know there's so many people who are listening right now who are like, I need more Kelly in my life. So tell everyone, and we'll put this in the show notes as well, but tell everyone where they can find you and how they can work with you.
Absolutely. So I am on Instagram primarily. It's at Kelly S. Ruta, Ruta. I am the only one in my DMs. So I tell people all the time, if you want to come in and share something personal or emotional based on what you heard in this episode, please do, because nobody else has access to my DMs but me. So you'll be hearing from me directly. And also, I put out webinars, workshops, trainings regularly. I have one coming up about a month from when this comes out. It's called Mind Over Money, and it really gets into everything that we were just talking about. So if that resonated with you, I strongly encourage you to come to the training. I don't do fluff. I am allergic to surface level stuff. I just don't have time for it. So everything I teach, whether it's free or paid, is a deep dive, and you will walk away with a ton of value. So I'd love to connect with you over on Instagram.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for joining us. Everyone, definitely go follow Kelly. We all I don't care if you're making, well, I don't know, maybe if you're like Elon Musk, you don't need any mindset work. He could probably use it in different ways, but
yeah, for sure.
We all need money mindset work. So thank you so much for joining us. Everybody go follow Kelly, and we'll be back next week. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, give the episode a like and leave a comment below so we can keep the conversation going. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a future episode or announcement. Listening on Apple, Spotify, or another podcast app, you can watch the video and join in the after show conversation by visiting hustleandflowpodcast.com.